But I remember, for some reason or other, being very excited when Fidel Castro made the revolution in Cuba. And I was a kid, and I remember reading that. And it was just seemed right and appropriate that poor people were rising up against rather ugly rich people. And I remember, again, very distinctly, a very distinct feeling. I was watching the debates. You remember the famous Nixon-Kennedy debates. That was the first time the presidential candidates actually debated. And I was becoming increasingly interested in politics. Didn't know much, but was interested. I remember sitting in the student lounge at our dormitory watching the debate. And at that time, well, we can talk about Cuba now, I was very excited and impressed by the Cuban Revolution. And there was Kennedy and Nixon talking about which particular method they should use about destroying the revolution. And I remember the irony, as we learned the history later on, Kennedy was saying that Nixon was too soft on communism. Let me pick up a point that Rick was making. In Cuba, we should deal firmly with Fidel Castro. And Nixon was playing the role of, hey, you got to be patient. You know, you can't do these things. You got to negotiate. Well, of course, what he was upset about is that secretly they were planning the Bay of Pigs invasion right then. So he was the liberal, and Kennedy was playing the conservative. And actually, you know, when you read novels, people say there's a sick feeling in your stomach. Usually I'm sufficiently unemotional not to be sick, but I actually got up in the room and almost left to puke. Because for the first time in my adult life, what I was seeing is the Democrats and the Republicans, both of them, and of course, as Rick points out, Kennedy was the flashing young liberal. And what we were seeing right before my eyes, way back then, and I didn't know anything about politics, but clearly that there really wasn't a whole lot of difference between the two. And you read the New York Times and you understand why they are not talking about what's going on in Nicaragua. Okay, that's the important story. The important story is not Nicaragua. It's not the United States government attitude toward Nicaragua, which is no different than it's been in 50 years. The United States has the right to destroy any government in Latin America that they want, and that's been consistent for 50 or 100 years. There's nothing new about that. What is new is why, when you read the New York Times, the real truth is not being told and how that's obfuscated. So if you want to read what goes on, and I was doing that. I remember reading and beginning to read about the Cuban Revolution, and what I was more impressed about is how it was being reported in the United States press. And I began to understand that you don't always hear all of the truth.